Afternoon, everybody. Just going to let everybody get logged in, get settled. We're going to start at exactly 2 minutes after the hour. So if you're late, no excuses. We've got a lot of content to cover. We're going to start in exactly 60 seconds. Okay, as we have a ton of content to cover here in the into the deep end webinar. This week we're covering the IGEL Cosmos release. Cosmos being UMS 12, IGEL OS 12, ICG 12. I have just a handful of slides I want to get through real quick before I turn it over to the man of the hour, Mr. IGEL in Canada, Mike Berman. So with that, let me run through my slides and we'll get onto the meat and potatoes of the presentation, if you will. To start things off, I just want to mention that XenTegra is giving away a couple of Ford Broncos between now and the end of the year, with the first Ford Bronco due to be given away in, I think it was 43 days I saw the other day. So if you're interested in winning a Ford Bronco, head over to XenTegra.com/Bronco-giveaway and fill out a quick form. I think it only asks for first name, last name, email address, and somebody will be in contact and we'll figure out how to get you into a new car. And it's worth mentioning actually that these cars actually exist. I know some of my colleagues around here are looking to buy new cars, and the cars are hard to come by with 12, 18-month wait times. These exist. They're in North Carolina right now, sitting in a driveway. I've seen them in person, and they're phenomenal cars. So do yourself a favor, XenTegra.com/Bronco-giveaway. Also, not quite as exciting, but as part of this webinar, we're going to give away some Amazon gift cards. So if you're interested in winning a gift card, put yourself ahead of the pack by simply put your hand up using the Q&A function within the Zoom webinar tool. Ask us a question, you'd be entered for some Amazon gift cards. I know we have a mixed audience, so Canada and US in the audience. So if you're from Canada, we'll give you a Canadian gift card. If you're in the US, we'll give you a US Amazon gift card. So on with that, let's talk a little bit about who XenTegra is before we turn it over to Mike and the IGEL team. And of course, we're going to start with yours truly. My name is Barry Brown. I'm the Director of Solution Architecture for XenTegra. I live in Halifax in Nova Scotia. So for those of you who don't know, Halifax in Canada, the land of Tim Hortons, maple syrup, and some of the worst hockey teams on the face of the earth, including Toronto Maple Leafs and Montreal Canadiens. Mike, that's for you. I've been in the industry for almost a quarter century now, and I've only been with XenTegra for a handful of months. But my last career, I guess I could say, I was focused entirely on EUC for the last 7-8 years. I'm also the CUGC leader for Toronto. That's the Citrix user group community, and I'm also the vMUG leader here in Halifax. I'm also a current VMware vExpert. I'm a certified IGEL architect and a Citrix certified expert. So I know a little thing or two about technology. But the most important thing on this slide, I'm a professional teller of dad jokes. If you guys want to hear some dad jokes, message me in the chat because I got a bazillion of them, which my kids hate. So on to a bit about XenTegra as a company. So the guy here in the top right is Andy Whiteside. He started the company way back in 2012, I believe it was. So this slide has a ton of information. I'm not going to go read it to you guys. You guys can all read. So I'll just hit the high points here. So XenTegra is a value-added reseller. You've all heard the term VAR, but what Andy and ourselves and the employee base are trying to create is VAR 2.0. What does that mean? It means any VAR can quote you SKUs, pricing, products. But what we really bring to the table is, the ability to do that, plus our technical capabilities, our technical experience. Here internally at XenTegra, we drink our own Kool-Aid. So, we sell Citrix, VMware, Microsoft Nutanix, blah, blah, blah. We also use those technologies. We all use Citrix internally. Our Citrix environment is powered by Nutanix. And of course, we're doing this on a Microsoft platform right now. And also our internal ticketing system that we sell to our customers and we help our customers implement is ServiceNow. So we really do, one of Andy's favorite phrases, we eat our own dog food. We also have a managed service practice within XenTegra. What that means is we can offer tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 support if your organization no longer wants to be in the support game. We also offer, which is a fantastic thing in my opinion, and I took advantage of this when I was on the customer side of the house, is complimentary assessments. We'll talk about that in a slide or two on what that actually is and how customers can leverage that. So as you can see from this, this picture here was taken in Fort Lauderdale in January when we all get together as a company to kind of have our sales kickoff for the year. If we were to take that exact same picture right now, there'd probably be another 15, 20 bodies in that because we're growing substantially. And as part of that growth, we're being recognized by our partners, specifically in this case, IGEL. IGEL really wasn't a well-known commodity in North America till late 2019, early 2020, and XenTegra got in on the ground floor of that. We were awarded the IGEL Partner of the Year, and as time progressed, Growth Partner of the Year, Marketing Partner of the Year, and just this February, actually, last in Nashville, we were awarded the Elite Partner of the Year, which is a big deal for us. So we live, breathe all things IGEL. That being said, we're not just an IGEL shop. We also do a ton of Citrix business. We're Citrix Partner of the Year, Nutanix Cloud Champions, fastest 5,000 growing company in the Mid-Atlantic. So, we're certainly a growing force to be reckoned with in the VAR 2.0 space. And, we probably are the only VAR 2.0 because we made up the term. So let's leave it at that. You guys obviously know that we do a ton of events. So in June alone, XenTegra is hosting 23 events. And if we think about that in terms of work days, in an average month, there's probably 20 working days in June. And so if we're doing 23 events, so we're doing more than one event a day. So if you're curious about any technologies, specifically in the EU space, in the EUC space, chances are we have a webinar or a podcast or an in-person event that will address your needs. So in June, these are 3 of the events that we have scheduled or upcoming. The first one is the NextGen OS for digital workspaces, which is hosted by our colleagues from XenTegra India. We also do a number of IGEL conversion workshops. What these are is we bring in customers, we give them a loaner unit of an LG Lenovo laptop. We actually convert the devices from Windows into an IGEL device, walk customers through how to register that with UMS and how to put it fully under management within 10, 15 minutes kind of thing. So it's a really cool hands-on workshop. So if you see one in your area, be sure to register, come on out, we'll be happy to have you. And the last thing is something relatively new. XenTegra is the first partner to be allowed to deliver ICP training. IGEL, ICP stands for IGEL Certified Professional. It's kind of it's not the base tier of certifications from IGEL. It's the second one up, just below the IGEL Certified Engineer. So if you're interested in learning the technical pieces of IGEL, I absolutely encourage you to come out to the ICP training. It's delivered by some of the best folks in the business, and it's really, really informative. As I mentioned, we also do a ton of podcasts. I'm partial to IGEL Weekly because I'm one of the co-hosts, and that we do these podcasts weekly. One from the community side of the house, where we bring in folks from the community, like real boots on the ground people, and the IGEL corporate podcast, where we more talk about IGEL strategy as a company, IGEL new releases, new products, and things along that nature. We also do a Citrix podcast, which is going to come in handy for what Mike's going to show later on when we demo the IGEL integration with Citrix. We also do a number of other podcasts, not necessarily related to IGEL or Citrix. We do a VMware podcast called VMware on the Horizon, specifically focused on VMware Horizon. Just on Monday, we recorded a brand new podcast that's not even out. You can't download it yet. We haven't given it a name, but it's focused on VMware Data Center. So that's your traditional DCV environments. We have an AVD podcast, a Syncing with ServiceNow podcast, And another one we're going to be reviving that we kind of lapsed there for a little while. We're bringing back our AWS podcast. So look for these podcasts in your podcatcher coming up here in the next few weeks. I mentioned at the top of the call that we also offer free assessments, what we internally call micro assessments. We do offer them for IGEL. So what that means is the free assessment, engage with your sales folks. They'll reach out to myself or somebody on my team, and we'll sit down with you as a customer and we'll do a deep dive into your IGEL environment. We could look at your ICG, your UMS, your policies, your profiles to make sure that they're installed, configured, and working as expected. So the output of these micro assessments is essentially a spreadsheet. It's a spreadsheet showing what we found and how it compares to the documented best practices from any given vendor. So we do the assessments for not just IGEL, we do them for Citrix, Nutanix, ServiceNow, and VMware. And it's not just VMware Horizon, we do them for VMware Data Center as well. Excuse me. So my second last slide here, I told you I was going to be quick because Mike does like to talk a lot, so I want to get in and get out. Calls to action from my little presentation here is plan to do some business with us. Bring us in to do some micro assessments for you. It's really one of those things. Unless you have the experience and the expertise, you don't know what you don't know about your environment. So I often found when I was a customer that a second set of free eyes is always a good thing. If you have upcoming renewals, upcoming quotes, by all means bring us in. We're happy to quote it. If you have renewals, new product investments you want to make, we come in, we can have those technical conversations to make sure you're using the right solutions for your business, and we can certainly help with that. If there's a technology out there that you're interested in and you don't necessarily want to go direct to a vendor, chances are XenTegra is a partner of that vendor, so we can certainly coordinate and facilitate that for you. And from a services perspective, we have a really deep bench of certified individuals who can come in, install, implement, architect, and configure, any given technology, Citrix, IGEL, you name it, we got it. And with that being said, it's time to go into the deep end with Mr. Mike Berman. Mike is the senior sales engineer for IGEL Canada, and I've known Mike for many, many years. He was my sales engineer when I was a customer of IGEL, and so whatever Mike says, believe it, because he knows this stuff inside out. I'm not going to steal Mike's thunder and go into his background. He can do that, but he's a wealth of experience in the industry, and you're in good hands with Mike from here on out. Just to reiterate, if you do have questions during Mike's presentation, please use the Q&A. I'll be monitoring that while Mike's presenting, and I'll interrupt Mike as we go along to bring your questions to his attention. With that being said, Mike, over to you, buddy.
Excellent. And I'll just get you to kill your share. Perfect. Excellent. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for spending the afternoon with us. Again, my name is Mike Berman, and I'm the pre-sales engineer up here in Canada for IGEL. Before joining IGEL, I was the lead sales engineer for Citrix in Canada, covering Central. So for those of you that are in the Central area, yes, I was your SE back then, and whenever I was with Citrix. So let's talk a little bit about Cosmos and what Cosmos is, what Cosmos isn't, and then get into some live demos. So if if we were to look at IGEL and kind of say, well, how did we get where we are right now with this Cosmos things? So when IGEL started way back when in the prehistoric times with our thin clients, when we were a thin client vendor and then moved into a software vendor, it was really all about delivering a secure endpoint device that was cost effective, that allowed users to be fully productive as if they were running a full fat PC, and they could really work from anywhere that they wanted to, as long as they were connecting up to some type of a virtualization, SaaS, or something else. And it ensured that no intellectual property ever traversed a firewall. So right now, up until to date, the latest version of the IGEL operating system prior to the release of Cosmos was OS 11, and the latest release of our management suite, Universal Management Suite, was version 6. And it was really about allowing you to connect from any device to any cloud to really do your work from anywhere and allow this to be central managed from one single pane of glass, whether these devices were on or off the corporate LAN. So when we looked at our OS 11 or prior to Cosmos, it really focused on these 5 pillars: security, ease of management, guaranteed performance on the end user experience side, huge savings when it comes to the ability to repurpose devices and really extend their life to the end. And by doing that, getting into this whole thing about saving the earth and sustainability, where we're not just getting rid of hardware because it's 3 years. On October of last year, IGEL announced that we are officially out of the hardware business. We no longer have hardware. We don't sell hardware. It's not the business we're in. And really, if you think about it, it's never the business we've been in. We've always been a software company. It's just that when we started off, we chose to package our software, our operating system on hardware, on thin client hardware, which, you know, in hindsight may have put us into a noisy space where there were others in there. But what we did is, rather than just saying we're done, we partnered with the top tier 1 vendors out there so that you're able to order devices directly from the likes of HP, Lenovo, or LG that are IGEL ready, so mapping directly to our old hardware or above and beyond what our old hardware was, certified, and in most cases, the ability to order this hardware directly from those vendors and have IGEL already on it. So these vendors here are also realizing that their thin solution may have not been the best. Hardware is great, but having an inferior Citrix, VMware, or non-existent AVD client really is a challenge whenever you're trying to play in this space. So these guys partnered up with IGEL, and now you can order these models plus others that will ship directly from the factory with IGEL OS, just requires a license and a configuration. So if everything was so great with OS 11 and everything was so wonderful, why Cosmos? Why change? Why do stuff differently? And that's because the world is changing right now. Prior to COVID, a lot of these things that were out there, these climate changes and lack of hardware and everybody working from certain places were nice to haves or not the norm. But COVID kind of all of a sudden made us take things that were on the back burner, like our virtualization project, our move to the cloud project, and make these things front and center. And when this whole idea of not being able to come into the office came to effect, all of a sudden, we had a lot of challenges that were out there. For instance, because everybody was not sitting in the office on their beige box plugged into the wall, controlling things like ransomware and malware became even more difficult. We all know how tough it is to do it today, just with devices we own that are in our corporate network. So how do we deal with this? Well, the first thing we need to do is, if we're going to be sending these devices out and they may be away from our touch, we need to ensure that that endpoint has a better sense of security than, for instance, just installing the Citrix client on Windows and telling that user to go to their basement where I can't watch them. That just scares me just to say that out loud. What else has happened since COVID? Well, this whole concept of hybrid work, whether I'm working from the office, whether I'm working from home, whether I have to do both with this. So now what do we need to do is we need to be able to manage these devices that are either on or off the corporate network. We need to have the ability to send out kill pills. We need to be able to send updates and configuration changes and really treat devices, whether they're in the office or out of the office, exactly the same, ensuring that all intellectual property has its integrity and never transverses a firewall, but yet users that are internal and external, should they need it, have the exact same access to the environment. Now, what about working from anywhere on any device, which is kind of that extension of hybrid work? Well, if now all of a sudden I'm anywhere and I'm on any devices, now things start to make me a little bit more concerned if I was on Windows, such as Are they running the latest version of an antivirus? Do they have one of the 300 plus updates that came down for Windows 10 last year? And let's remember, there's only 365 days in the year, 300 plus updates. That's a lot of updating, right? So when we look at this, really what we need to be able to do is, if we're going to allow these users to work from anywhere, not only do we need to be on the management side, where we're able to manage and kill pill and send updates and firmware updates and update the content on it, from an end user experience, I need to be able to feel like I'm working inside the office. When I'm on a Zoom call and I'm using a camera and screen sharing and headsets and all of that, it needs to work. If I'm going from Team to Zoom, I need that to be able to work. And I truly need to be able to do this as if I was running on a full-fledged PC sitting inside of the office. But I want the ability as an end user to have the flexibility to work from anywhere. But it really isn't good for me if I don't have that high fidelity experience that I would have in the office. Now, what about whenever it comes to the way that we're accessing out there? Well, back in the office, most of the time, we were accessing maybe applications locally, maybe applications over Citrix, but most of the stuff was happening inside of our data center, and they were usually Windows-based applications that were installed on some type of an app server, and we would deliver this down to our Citrix environment, or perhaps we had things locally installed and we would just talk to a data store. But now that we're talking about devices from anywhere, users from anywhere, and really accessing anything from anywhere, we really need to get into this flexibility. And when I was at Citrix, we had an awesome word, which was anyness. And it really allowed you to connect from anything to anything from anything. So really being able to do my job no matter what, as long as I'm able to get to a device. And really the outcome of this, or the added bonus, is you end up future-proofing yourself. When you're not locking yourself into a single technology or OS, and really starting to decentralize and starting to manage from one single pane of glass, you get the ability to move from Citrix to AVD, from VMware to Citrix, from Citrix to VMware, from Windows 365 to AVD, or more like the rest of the world's doing, really having a hybrid environment of all of that. And then you take the last little bit, which is really what is happening all over the world right now. And a simple thing to look at is like getting anything, a car, a computer. We are running out of chips, then there's an abundance of chips. We can't get this, then there's so much of this. So really, we have this total uncertainty whenever it comes to the technology. The whole climate changes, if you look at what's going on right now with the fires that are going over, like our country right now up here in Canada is burning from end to end. We have fires that are at the Pacific all the way to the Atlantic. So that wasn't planned. Nobody had that in their calendar last year, that they could have planned for that accordingly. And then talking about all the uncertainty when it comes to the economics. And this week we hear that we're going to have some type of a recession, and then we're not, and then we are. And so really, how do we do this and take the technology into consideration? Well, the first thing is, and we've always said this at IGEL, the most important thing is save the planet. And if you came to any of the IGEL events over the last year, you'll notice that we didn't give away swag this year. What we were doing is we're planting trees in the rainforest. So we have a huge goal of planting, I don't even remember the huge number. And rather than giving away stuff, what we did is we planted a tree in everybody's name that came to Disrupt. And we're doing the same thing, because really this concept of having a computer and throwing it away every 3 years, hi, it's 1995, we'd really like our technology back. It is 2023, and we have to start thinking differently. because this is truly the world we live in right now. We live in this hybrid workspace where, as an employee, I really need to get to lots of different things, potentially multiple clouds for different desktops or different apps. And with acquisitions coming on board, I may be in Citrix and VMware at the exact same time, and then have to reach outside to maybe have a Zoom call like this. So how do I ensure intellectual property integrity? How do I ensure that intellectual property never transverses a firewall? How do I ensure that my users have an awesome experience? And how, as an IT person, do I ensure that I can go home and have a great sleep at night, knowing that none of my technology has really left my data center, whether these users are in the office or outside of the office? So what is Cosmos? Well, Cosmos itself is a platform. It's not a product. It's not a one thing you buy. It's actually an endpoint platform that includes management and endpoint operating system. It allows you to secure your endpoints, to extend the life of your endpoints, and truly give those users that rich end user experience that they've come to expect by having a fully packed PC. It's easy to manage. You can manage hundreds to thousands of devices or hundreds of thousands of devices from one single pane of glass, and allowing you to extend the life of that hardware and until it truly hits its end of life, allows you, from a sustainability and a recycling perspective, great. But what about the savings of not having to do a refresh every 3 years just because? So what is the Cosmos platform? Well, it starts off with the new version of the IGEL operating system, and that's IGEL OS 12. And what's different between IGEL OS 12 and OS 11 is we've turned everything into an app in OS 12. The operating system is an app, Citrix is an app, VMware is an app, AVD is an app, Chrome is an app, printing is an app. Everything is an app, and it allows you now to basically build out your IGEL OS on the endpoint device to only have what's needed. If I look at OS 11, it is a monolithic version of the operating system. It's got the OS and all of the different pieces of the IGEL Ready partnership, Citrix, VMware, Microsoft, browsers, etc. They're all turned off and disabled by default, so it's not a security concern, but they all are in there by default, which makes the install quite large. If I look at OS 12, because everything is modular and everything is an app, I can actually say that I want this version of the IGEL OS on there and this version of Citrix Workspace app. And if I don't need a browser and I don't need Citrix and I don't need AVD, that's all that's inside of your IGEL OS now. If you were to look inside, you would see all of the OS components, and then you would just see Citrix Workspace app for Linux. You won't see anything else because it doesn't actually exist. It exists when you assign it to the device. It will then reach out to the App Store, which we'll talk about in a minute, and pull down those binaries and put it onto that device. So the actual device itself has a much smaller footprint because not everything is installed on the device. It also allows you to upgrade the app without having to do the full update of the entire OS that you have to do today in OS 11. So if I wanted to put on, the latest version of Citrix Workspace app, I don't have to upgrade to the latest version of IGEL OS that includes the Workspace app. I just simply have to get from the App Store the latest version of Workspace app and just simply update that. The same would be if I needed to upgrade the operating system. So 12.1.200 gets released. Well, I can just simply upgrade the OS and not be worrying about upgrading all of the applications because they've been completely separated. And one of the integrations that OS 12 has is a full single sign-on support. Right now, it's with Okta, Ping, and Microsoft Azure AD. But this would allow you to log on once and have those credentials tokenized and passed on to different desktops, workspaces, and SaaS type-based applications. The next thing in line in the Cosmos platform is an upgrade to UMS. So UMS 12. UMS 12 introduces a web console that does something. If you look at UMS 6 and you look at the web console, well, it was pretty and all, but it did like 7 things, rebooted, shadowed, and everything. But you truly had to manage everything out of the Java console. With UMS 12, you're able to manage OS 11 and OS 12, and you're able to do this through a web console, as well as the Java console for some of the OS 11 and some of the under the hood stuff. But to the most extent, you're able to manage your entire environment through a web console now, which from an IT perspective, if you think about it, makes it much easier, because now if I want to manage IGEL devices, I simply need to get to a browser. We've introduced a new unified protocol. So if you think about OS 11, if I want to manage devices that are off the corporate LAN, I require the IGEL Cloud Gateway, the ICG, to be sitting somewhere with an internet-facing port. With the new unified protocol, that's no longer needed, and you can manage devices on and off the corporate network fully secure without the need of ICG. I still need ICG for OS 11, even if I'm using UMS 12. But if I'm managing OS 12 devices with UMS 12, I no longer require the ICG. And now that everything is delivered from an app portal, I can now tell the device where it's going to fetch its app. So if I have devices that are on the corporate LAN, they can fetch the apps directly from UMS. But if I have users that are working from home, I don't have to proxy them through the corporate network to fetch those apps. I can actually have those devices go directly to the App Store and pull those binaries down. User doesn't need to log in or anything. It's behind the scenes, because via a profile, I'm telling it where to go get it. So when that profile is on the device, it knows that it'll fetch that application out of the App Store. And then the last piece that completes the Cosmos platform is the cloud services. Some cloud services have existed all along, and there are new ones that have come as well. So the first one is the onboarding service, and this is meant for users that are off the corporate LAN, that maybe have a UD Pocket or have been sent home with an IGEL device. In the OS 11 model, you would have to go through that first-time wizard on the ICG, pointing to the cloud gateway, putting in your one-time activation token, and go through that wizard once to marry your external device into UMS. With the new onboarding services, users simply have to put in their corporate email address. That email address will be able to find out where their UMS is, and then send them off to an IDP, whether it's Azure AD, Ping, or Okta, verify those credentials, validate them, and then send it off to the UMS, where it will then complete the enrollment, pull down any applications, and the user will be onboarded by just having to know their email address. And I'm going to show this in a demo later on, that you can see how it's just simply putting that in. Application portal, I talked about that briefly, and I'll show it to you, but this is basically an app store. Think about your phone. When you get your new phone, the only thing that's really on there is some utilities and the operating system. And then you, as the owner of the phone, can go to the app store and install what you would need. Same sort of concept here, other than the administrator owns the app store, unless it's an unmanaged device. And then, of course, whatever. But in this case, the administrator owns the app store. They can assign applications and profiles to devices. Devices pull it down and they're good to go. Insight Services gives you information about what's going on. How many devices are running this version of IGEL? How many LGs, how many HPs are out there? How many are running this version of Citrix? How many are running this version of VMware? Now, this information has always been in there, but aggregating has been a little bit different. So Insight Services gives you that high level. It's not meant to replace something like a control op or something like that can give you really in the black box what's going on. This just gives you a higher level, a little bit more detail of what's happening inside of the IGEL environment. So when we look at this on a picture, this is what Cosmos looks like. All of this stuff at the top is delivered and managed by IGEL and sits up in Azure. UMS 12, you can choose where you can put it just like you could before. You can either run it on-prem, or if you choose, you can put it in a cloud. At the moment, IGEL doesn't have a UMS as a service offering. So if you wanted a cloud-based UMS, it would be you putting up in the cloud or working with someone like XenTegra who could actually do that hosting for you. And then you just get management planes. So at the end of the day, it's UMS as a service. So it's fully available from our value-added partners like XenTegra, where they can do that for you. It'll be hosted by them, but you can still manage it as the IT department, but they'll be your hosting department. And then the last little bit over here is, yes, like I mentioned before, UMS 12 can manage both OS 11 and OS 12. So the first step is I get UMS 12 in there, and then I can start testing OS 12 and still continue to manage OS 11 exactly the same way as I do it today. So this is kind of a little look as to what OS 12 looks like. We're going to go in and see this thing live, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a taste before we got to the demo of what does it look like. You can see that the whole interface is being modernized. The alerts themselves are HTML5 alerts, so they eventually will be able to be pinned all over the place should you want to, and you'll be able to completely redesign the IGEL operating system to make it your own going forward, where everything will be modularized, including the title bar down at the bottom. So, like I mentioned, separated the apps and the operating system. So I can simply remove applications, but not touch the operating system. Or I can simply update the operating system and not touch the applications. So totally separating both the apps and the desktop so that you can control what's get updated when. From a single sign-on procedure, I can have it log on once to my IDP and then have those credentials passed off to whether I'm logging into some form of a VDI or maybe going off to some type of a Win365, O365 type of an environment where I'm not having to log into both, simply log into one and have those credentials shared across it. So what's new in UMS 12? Well, we've made it simpler to manipulate. When it comes to app management, you're able to download the applications to UMS and be able to configure them at an app level. So here, if you notice, there's IGEL AVD. Once I've downloaded the application, I can simply click on a button that says create profile, and that's how I can go in and configure the environment. Once I've downloaded the application, I could have different profiles pointing to the same piece of code. So if I had different environments with different settings, for instance, with Citrix, I only have to download the Citrix code once, but I could have different farms being pointed to or different delivery groups being pointed to without having to download this thing over and over and over. I could just create multiple profiles that point to the exact same executable. So the first step whenever I'm creating a profile is I say new profile, and the first thing it asks me is, what app are you creating this profile for? So I can pick, I'm creating it for AVD, I'm creating it for Citrix or whatever. And then I have to ask myself in that profile, and this is for folks that are OS 11 folks, if you're creating a profile and you remember leading practices, a profile should do one thing and one thing only. Sometime in that one thing and one thing only, you're manipulating the OS. So if you think about any of you that have done demos or POCs with me have seen where I set up the Active Directory login directly to a virtual desktop. And when you log in there, you see no taskbar, no title bars, no icons, no nothing on the desktop, because the next step would be connecting you into your VDI. Well, because I need to have both the Citrix piece to connect me to Citrix, but I also want to remove things like the taskbars and stuff. I would also want to include in this profile the OS, because the only thing that gets shown to me inside the profile is what's attached to it. So you'll notice here for this AVD profile, the only thing that's here is AVD. If you think about Windows on OS 11, you have everything: Citrix, VMware, sessions, accessories, all of those things that go up and down. Well, here we only have AVD. Why? Because that's all this profile is for. And we're going to see this live whenever I show you the demos. Now, when it comes to the app portal, whoops, the app portal has apps. We're going to peek at this, but this is just the top level of the app portal. And you can see the different types of apps. You can see that ones that are not installed in your environment are just marked as new. And ones that are in your environment that are up to date are up to date. And if there was one that was in your environment that wasn't up to date, it would say update so that you're able to pull that down to your environment. Little bit about what the Insight Services looks like, so you can get these graphical representations and reporting. So you can see here at the top one's an example that you can get a segment of the different type of hardware that's out there, or maybe the different type of devices, or different type of virtualization, or different flavors of the Citrix Workspace app. So this is really meant for you to get some more details compared to what you can get today in OS 11, which is quite limited. So what does the onboarding service look like? And this is that whole thing that I was talking about of getting you online. So I will play this video and I will talk through the video. This is basically going to show you an onboarding brand new, out of the box, never used before IGEL. So the first thing it asks you is to confirm your language and your keyboard, just like in OS 11. Agree to the license agreement, the EULA, and accept that. The next thing it says is, do you want us to allow to check your IP and figure out where you are and set the time? And you can say yes, and it will go out there and automatically set the date and time based on where you are. And now you're going to put in your email address, your corporate company email address here. Now, if you remember in OS 11, how much we stress date and time must be correct because of certificates. Notice in this, you didn't need to. So I put in my email address. If it's valid, I get sent off to my IDP, in this case, Azure AD, to put in my password. If those password is valid, it now knows where UMS is. It's sending this device directly to my UMS, and it's going to pull down the configuration, it's going to pull down licensing, it's going to pull down anything that it needs, including the application, and then get you to a desktop that has all of your applications that you can now start clicking on and do your job, whatever it happens to be it Citrix, be it VMware, be it whatever it happens to be. So that's what a new device out of the box kind of looks like when you plug it in. So the only thing that you need to answer is, what is my email address? And once you put in your email address, you self-register. I have a couple more slides and I'm going to get right into the demo here. But the first thing is, why would I want to use Cosmos, right? Everything's great with 11. Everything's great. Why would I want to move to 12? Well, when we move to OS 12, UMS 12, and this whole cloud service, we start moving into a new authentication service. We start going into single sign-on and start getting into this IDP controlling your user ID and password, and not having to have sessions that are unauthenticated where users can simply, log on. So fully encrypted and secure. Endpoint onboarding, super easy now. Email is the only thing they need. But from a management perspective, you can still manage hundreds of thousands of devices from one single pane of glass. Now that we've moved to an app store and we've decoupled the applications from the operating system, we'll now start seeing quicker releases of partner applications. So, right now, when Citrix releases the next version of Workspace app, or VMware releases the next Horizon client, we're relying on the folks in Germany to package up the next version of IGEL OS to include that. Now that it's with an app store, you're almost at a 0 day that when it's available, all that needs to happen is that application will be packaged by the vendor and updated in the App Store, and you'll be able to pull down the latest and greatest version of, for instance, Citrix, and be able to update your devices pretty much on a 0 day without having to wait for the whole OS to be updated from the back end. Because we're using the same latest and greatest native clients, you're still going to guarantee that your users are going to be highly productive and have a great user experience. And that's truly because if you strip apart the ends here, this is still IGEL OS. We're still a true Linux-based operating system using native clients directly from those vendors. And by doing that, you guarantee end user satisfaction as well as IT admin satisfaction, right? So let's think about us as the administrators and let's try and make our life a little bit easier. And really, whenever it comes down to, we haven't changed what we've been talking about ever since day one. The biggest thing about IGEL is the ability to save you lots and lots of dollars, because most of the time the hardware that you're looking to dispose of can be easily be repurposed into a high-powered device. Now, you can't fix physics, right? Like if it isn't a good machine, then obviously I can't invent a GPU that doesn't exist there. But if there happens to be hardware under the hood and it just simply wasn't able to take advantage of it because of the inferior OS that or firmware that was running on it, you can probably breathe some new life into that existing hardware. And by doing this, you future-proof yourself so that you're able to be running any version of any client, from any SAS to any VDI to any DAS, truly a thing of anyness, where we're in this digital workspace where the uncertainty of what we're going to do tomorrow, the next day, or next week is really up in the air. So you're all listening to me babble about this. Some of you are new customers, some of you are not customers at all, but really you're telling me about this thing. So how do I get my paws on this? Well, if you're an existing customer and you have subscription, doesn't matter if you're running OS 11, if you're on IGEL subscription, then you are running the platform license and you are entitled to run OS 12 today. If you are a new customer, the license you buy allows you to run OS 12 or OS 11. So when you're working with your partner like XenTegra or your sales engineer and you're looking at what you're going to be testing in your proof of concept, we're going to be looking at things like, what are your workflows? Because OS 12 is a mature product, but the GA was only in April. So we've been testing this and we've had beta testers since 2 years ago. This is not something that got incubated over a couple of days and released. It is a fully ready for production product. However, there were only certain workflows that were focused on to release the GA in April. So we need to make sure before you start testing the OS 12 portion, UMS 12, good to go for everybody. OS 12, we're going to want to just make sure that your workflows are there right now, because it's not 100% parity between 11 and 12. And that's where the expertise, like somebody like Barry and XenTegra, or if you're working directly with your sales engineer at IGEL, they're going to be the ones that are going to be able to give you the guidance of, are you going to be testing OS 11 or OS 12? But just know that everybody's entitled to this. If you already have OS 11, there's no cost for you to test it, providing you're on the right licensing, which would be anything you bought recently. And for those of you buying net new, know that your license works for both. You can have 11 and 12, and you can have that hybrid environment. Should you find that some users need something that's still in OS 11, well, most users can move to OS 12. You're still managing from that one single pane of glass. It's not two different management things to manage 11 and 12. It is still single pane of glass to manage both. So should you want to start your journey to UMS 12, to Cosmos, the first thing you need to do is get UMS 12 in play. If you're net new, you don't have a choice because you can't download UMS 6 anymore. It's not on the website. If you're an existing customer, you do need to upgrade your current UMS 6 to UMS 12. It is an in-place upgrade. But like I tell everybody, I would recommend that you snapshot your server before and during the upgrade process, take that backup. And then let the upgrade complete. You'll be in UMS 12. From the first look of it, whenever you boot it up and log in the GUI, it looks pretty much the same, other than the word 12 at the top or the number 12 instead of 6. And a couple of the names have been changed inside of the actual console. But to the most extent, if you're running OS 11 on UMS 6, you can go to 12 without a problem and be able to manage those 11 devices, but also give yourself the ability to start playing with 12. So that's basically what I said. Cosmos is a platform license and everybody really has access to it. So that's what I had from a few little slides here to show you guys. I'm going to stop here and pause and see if we have any questions regarding the slides that are there before I jump into a quick little demo of what this Cosmos actually looked like.
Mike, there's no questions in the chat, but I do have a question.
Absolutely.
Do you recommend to your customers today to get on with upgrading to UMS almost immediately? There's no reason not to use UMS 6 when you can be using 12.
Correct. That is correct. So what I will do, so here's the thing. If you're a net new customer, it's completely irrelevant because you can't download it. If you go to the software download site and you go under downloads, there's no UMS 6 anymore. You can't have it. So if you're a net new customer, it's a moot point because you can only download 12. If you're an existing customer, well, you should plan your migration or your upgrade to 12. Again, you don't have to be getting to OS 12 just yet, but you should at least be getting UMS to the latest and greatest because there is no UMS 6 anymore. So all the new features, functionalities, fixes, and what have you will only be going into 12.
Okay. A question from the chat. Has an end-of-life date been announced for OS 11?
Yeah, I believe it's, I'm going to say it out loud, and I know this is recorded, but I'm going to put a lot of asterisks and underline it saying, I believe, but you can get this off of IGEL's website. If you just look up the matrix, you can get all the end-of-life matrix. I believe end of sale, so end of sale, which means support still goes on, is December 31st, 2025, I believe, is end of sale. Okay, so then there's end of support is always much later than end of sale. You just won't be able to buy anything that will run on OS 11. I believe it's December 31st, 2025.
Steve is asking in the chat, what flavor Linux is needed for ICG rather?
So if you're doing ICG, it is in the prereqs, but pretty much Ubuntu can be down there. You can use, I believe you can use Amazon Linux. It is in the prereqs at the top of my head. I don't remember what they are. But most of the standard Linuxes that are out there, paid ones and free ones that are out there. And there's a whole guide on how to harden it down before you put ICG on it.
Yeah, my 2 cents on that. Every implementation of ICG I've seen has been Ubuntu.
That's what I see out there as well.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for questions. Mike, if you want to get on with demo time, I know we're kind of running a little low on time here.
Excellent. All right, so let's get on with some demos here and have a look at what IGEL looks like. So this is an IGEL device that has been onboarded to my UMS already, but I haven't done anything to it. So all I've done is I brought it into my UMS. If I look at local setup on this thing, notice I have accessories, user interface, networking, devices, security system. But notice there is nowhere here that has any applications. There's no sessions, there's no nothing. Even if I was to go to system and I was to go to the registry, notice if you go through the registry and you look under sessions, which is normally where you find Citrix and VMware and all of that, notice there's nothing there. It just has to do with the app portal and Bluetooth and command and GNOME and setup and all of that. But I don't see Citrix anywhere. I don't see VMware anywhere. I don't see anything. And the reason is this is an OS 12 box. So by default, the only thing that's on this thing is the operating system. If I go here and say, okay, what's on this thing? And I go to, the information flag, like you can go on as well. You can see here that I'm running version 12.01.120. The product name is now just OS 12, whereas before it would be OS 11.08.230 or whatever it is. Now it just basically tells you that it's an OS. And if I scroll down in this information thing, and I look at the apps, these are ones that are just basically pending. But you can see that I really have no applications that are installed here other than some multimedia stuff that hasn't been pulled off since my last reboot, or that would be gone. But if you look at your OS 11 machine and you look under installed apps, you'll see Citrix, VMware, Microsoft, blah, 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 blah. Everything's already there as long as you're licensed. And that's because nothing's on this box, because I don't have anything on this box. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this box here that's basically doing nothing. It's just a IGEL device that's got nothing on it other than the operating system. And I'm going to make this thing a little bit more useful. And I'm going to join this thing into my Citrix environment. So in the background, just like, like whenever you do it in OS 11, I'm simply dragging and dropping my device from the directory that it was in into the new directory that I want to do. And I'm going to tell it to do it now. And you'll notice in a minute or so, you're going to see that the Citrix client is going to start to be pushed down from the App Store because it's not physically on this device yet. So it needs to come down. So there we go. It just updated it. It downloaded the Citrix Workspace app 2302, latest and greatest. I'm going to restart my IGEL device here. And when this device restarts, I'm going to have a IGEL device that a moment ago couldn't do anything other than it was an IGEL device to a fully functional device that can connect to my Citrix environment and start running applications. Now, I appreciate that we're going to be going a wee bit long on this webinar, and I apologize ahead of time. I hope most of you can stick around for the next 5 minutes, because that's really all it's going to take is maybe an extra 5 minutes. But for those of you that don't, just know that this is being recorded, and XenTegra will share the link. So if you do need to drop to do something, I do appreciate that and respect your time. And just know that you'll be able to get the recording and just be able to kind of go to the end of the meeting and watch that last little bit where I'm doing these demos. And then, of course, if any questions come up post webinar, please feel free to reach out to the folks at XenTegra. They'll be able to help you with answers, POCs, anything that you may question about what's going on from today. So now that I'm on my device here, you now see that I have an icon on my desktop. If I click on my start menu, again, the only thing I have access to is this connect to my Citrix environment. And if I run local setup again, I've locked my box down. So you notice I've hidden local setup and everything, kind of like a best practice thing. But you notice now if I run local setup, I now have this extra tab called apps. And under that extra tab called apps, this is where all my Citrix settings are, which I didn't see before I pushed down Citrix. And now if I go to my system and I go to my registry, I now have my app thing here where I can configure all of the Citrix stuff that you would normally do inside of your Citrix settings. As well as if I now go to my little information thing here and say what's installed on the box and roll myself down here, I now also see that I've got my Citrix Workspace app 2302 installed on this box. It wasn't there before. And now I can simply just click on my icon for my Citrix applications. It connects me up to my store, and I can log on with my Citrix Active Directory credentials, logs me onto Citrix Workspace app. I get my applications populated my desktop. I can go about my business. I can click on an app should I want to start. Of course, it does the same thing. My credentials are already being tokenized. It passes them off to Citrix Workspace app, gets the application already started for me. And in less than 20 to 30 seconds, I have my first application on the desktop. I can minimize this guy down to the taskbar like before. There it is. I can bring it here. And just like any other Citrix implementation, my second application should start almost instantaneous. Excuse me. And I can, do things here. I can copy it. I can paste it. I can do things just like a regular Windows environment. And then when I'm done, I can simply just close up my Citrix applications and log off. And then this device is ready for the next user to come up and securely log in. All the applications go away and the next user needs to log in. But what about if I'm using Citrix And all of a sudden, we are moving away from Citrix to, let's say, AVD. In a Windows environment, this is a big challenge because I need to get to every single device. I need to push things down. I need to make sure I uninstall. I need to make sure the configs are there. But what I can do is if I wanted to say, you know what, this device here, I now want to uninstall Citrix and I want to move it and have AVD. And not only do I want to have AVD, but our corporation now wants us to have a local browser on our machine so we can do some SaaS-based type applications. So I can simply in UMS tell this device that I want to uninstall Citrix, I want to install Chrome, and I want to install the AVD client on this same box. Now, this box can be a user that's at home. This box can be a user that's in the office. Really, at the end of the day, this box can be anywhere that I want it to be. And now I've basically changed up what's on the box here. I've removed Citrix. I've added AVD. I've added a Chrome browser. And all that needs to happen is the device needs to reboot. Now, you're probably asking yourself, what happens if the user doesn't reboot? Well, it just doesn't work. Citrix no longer works because it's being pulled off. You saw it down at the bottom. So maybe there's a residue of an icon, needs to reboot, but it won't work. But the newly installed applications don't have icons yet because they just got installed and they got to kind of get married into the operating system. So they appear as if they're, well, they are as if they're locally installed. We need to do that one reboot when we're adding or removing applications. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, wait a minute, in OS 11, I never had to do that. That's correct. Because in OS 11, everything was already there. All we were doing is just enabling and disabling the actual application or services. In OS 12, the app's not there. So when we physically install something into the environment, we need to just reboot Linux so it recognizes that that application is actually installed into the operating system now, which is why we had to do a reboot after we push down different application configs. It's because it's being installed and it needs to be recognized by the operating system. And now, remember, a minute ago, this exact same box only could connect to Citrix. Now on the same box, and this user could be at home, could be in the office, could be on their yacht, as long as they've got internet connection. And now I've got a real local browser. It's not running in Citrix. It's not running under AVD. It's not really running anywhere other than locally inside the operating system. And I've also got Citrix Workspace app to go into, sorry, not Citrix Workspace app, but AVD. So here's my local Chrome browser. It's just a local browser that's running inside of my IGEL OS that I can do whatever I need to do. But I also now have access, instead of to Citrix, I now have access to getting into AVD. So if I go here and I put in my AVD credentials, you'll notice that on the exact same box that I just only had Citrix access to, now I only have access to AVD. Maybe I didn't type that right. We'll see. Could be a typo. Yeah, there we go. AVD and a browser. I don't have access to anything else other than AVD and a browser, and I could connect to, if I wanted to connect to, I could easily connect to my Windows 11 desktop in the cloud. I believe this desktop is might be in the Netherlands, because this is one of the SEs that lives in Sweden. So it's probably whatever Microsoft data center is closest to him is where he put his AVD instance. But we log in and here we are, Windows 11. I can start doing my job on a device that moments ago only allowed me to connect into Citrix. And now all of a sudden I'm connected to AVD. This could be devices at home. These can be anywhere. And again, I didn't have to remove Citrix. I could have just simply added AVD. So again, it wasn't a one or the other. I could easily have Citrix and AVD available to a user so that if we're in some form of a migration going from one to the other, I would be able to have both of my desktops available to me to connect to without having to worry about, do I have the right client? And that's one of the biggest challenges with work from home. Do I have the right client installed? Is that box secure and safe? Do I have any challenges with local firewalls, antiviruses that potentially could be making this not work? And then whenever I'm done, right? I have nothing here. I have to log in. If I was to click on my workspace again, you have to log in. So when I close down my sessions, I am secure and I am completely locked down and no one else can do anything. And if I go back into this little guy here and say, well, what's installed now? And we scroll on down to what's installed, I can see that I've got a Chromium browser installed. I've got an AVD client installed. This is the base I've got here. And that's it. And I've got the RD Core client installed. And I've got a working Windows 12 desktop. So think about OS 12 desktop. Out of the box, username, password, bing, bing, bing. I've got a working environment that I can actually go about my business and do things. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you is if you are doing, let's say that you're doing a AVD environment, and this is what we did for a community college out in British Columbia, Canada, and they are using IGEL devices and they are an AVD customer. So their labs, basically the lab desktops live in AVD, and they were able to repurpose, I think that they were 5 to 7 year old hardware that could barely run Windows 10 with IGEL OS. And what they did is they configured these devices to truly be a thin device to allow them to get to their AVD environment. So for their students, what it was is the ability to get to AVD, but without knowing that there's really kind of any IGEL or anything behind the scenes. Right? So normally, whenever you boot up a device, let's just wait for this to happen. That's fine. Normally, whenever you boot up a device, it would boot up into the IGEL operating system. You would see the whole desktop. You would have to go click on things and do different things. Well, they didn't want their students to have to do that. What they wanted is that the student would power up this piece of hardware and immediately be able to connect into their environment, so that it would basically log in and connect them directly to their Azure virtual desktop. So when this guy boots up, you'll notice when I've already pre-populated in credentials here. I just want to get that going, but you'll notice that there's no options on this thing other than to connect to a desktop. So it's not like you can use this as a device to really do anything other than connect up to your environment. So it makes it a lot more of a purpose-built machine versus what is this thing that I'm on and how does it work and what is IGEL? Because remember, all of this stuff that you see where IGEL is being displayed doesn't necessarily need to be there. All of the splash screens and all of the logos and graphics that you see here, just know they can be completely with your logos and icons and stuff to that effect. Let me just wait for this guy to boot up. Perfect. So if I was to say that this guy, browser, auto start, that's this one is where I want it to be. Put you right here. It's here, move it over. And we're going to get this guy to go into an automatic state, which will turn this guy more into a AVD thin device, if you will, than a IGEL. So if you notice, it's got the AVD client on here. If I close the AVD client, I'm just at a desktop. And the only option that I can do is I can just basically start the AVD client over and over and over again. If I reboot this machine, it's got auto start on it. So it's going to auto start this client. If I close the client down, it's going to automatically restart the client. So basically what this does is it turns the device, and this could be for Citrix as well, or it could be any of the virtualization, that when the IGEL device boots up itself, it basically, well, you don't know, because this little IGEL thing at the bottom could be your corporate logo, should you want it to be. So what the university did is this is how these devices boot up. And they have the little university logo down at the bottom. And when it boots up, this is what it shows. If you click on the X, this comes back. If you reboot it, it comes back to this. And what the student does is logs in with their student email address and password, and they get put through into their virtual desktop, which is part of whatever program they're in. So they have all the correct applications that they need to be a student at that particular school for that particular course. So that's all that I had for today in my demos. So I'm going to pause now and see if anybody has any questions. And if not, I'd like to wrap it up.
So Mike, there's no questions directly. There was a couple of questions I fielded on your behalf, so don't take it personally.
That's all right. It allows me to talk.
Right. So with that being said, Mike, thank you for taking the time out. That was an excellent overview of the Cosmos platform, UMS IGEL OS 12. And thank you to our audience for joining us today. I know we did run a little over, but hopefully there was real value in those demos at the very end. For me, that's where I get that's where I learn is seeing how the product works, how it can be used and how flexible it is. We kind of ran out of time, but there was a whole story to be told there on the last piece around security. You can't do much if you can't do much is kind of what it boils down to.
Exactly. If it's not there, you can't attack it.
Exactly. So with that being said, let's call this a webinar. And for the folks who are still on the call, go to XenTegra.com/events for any other events you may be interested. Like I mentioned at the top of the call, there's a pile of IGEL specific events coming down the pipe. I'm looking forward to seeing you on other events. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.